with Isabel Webster and Martin Daubney. Here's what's making the front pages this morning.
And you guessed it, there's only really one story in town. In the Sun, they say Harry Kane is vowing to lift nation as the Lions of Arabia kick off their World Cup today versus Iran.
And the Daily Star leads with, is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Super Kane, as England striker is hoping to bring back the trophy to England in his dreams.
In The Guardian, after all that cash, a humbling for Qatar as the hosts lose their opening match 2-0 versus Ecuador.
And the Daily Mail leads with the World Cup threat to England's Harry as skipper could be booked for that rainbow armband.
So those are your front pages. Let's take a look inside the papers now. We're joined by the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the Olympian Chris Akabusi. Warm welcome back to both of you. Dawn, shall we start with Joe Lycett, who seems to be the master of PR, never mind comedy?
Absolutely, it was a very cunning PR stunt, wasn't it?
Best 10K he's ever spent on PR.
Well, exactly, yeah, it's cheaper than hiring a PR agency, isn't it? This is Joe Lycett, the comedian, a gay comedian, who appears to have shredded £10,000 of his own money after David Beckham refused to pull out of his role as Qatar ambassador. Now, David Beckham has been paid 10 million, we think, we're not sure, £10 million to promote the country where the World Cup is currently being played, and it's all over the publicity for you flying out there. Yeah, absolutely. So Joe Lycett, who said, right, okay, David Beckham, you have supposedly supported the LGBTQ plus community, and how can you then go to a country where homosexuality is punishable by death? So I am willing to shred £10,000 of my money, which is £1,000 for every million that you have received, unless you actually give some of your money, or the 10 million, to charity. David Beckham obviously completely ignored this. So yesterday, Joe Lycett actually dressed as some sort of Lou Roll doll. Do you remember the Lou Roll doll is?
Yeah, Lou Roll.
Yeah, Lou Roll. I can't if it was a Lou Roll or a Big Bird gone. Yeah. So dressed like that, Pride Big Bird. So took £10,000 supposedly of his money and put it in a wood chipper. Now I looked at that money and I thought, I'm not sure that is actually real hard cash.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a bit grotesque, isn't it?
It's incredibly grotesque. Like, I get the point, and the original video he put out was actually quite funny, especially his jibe about being a West Brom fan. So I get the original thing, and I fully support the message. I don't think Beckham should be there, and I don't think he should be taking that blood money, because that's what it is. However, in the cost of living crisis, to actually destroy £10,000.
That could go to charity.
It just feels profoundly wrong, but I am not convinced that actually was all real money.
You think it was fake?
I think, Martin, there might be money on top, because it just looks so perfect, like Monopoly money.
The KLF, when they burned £1 million in the 90s, I used to like the KLF, and at the time everyone thought, wow, it's art.
Yeah.
Making a huge statement, but this guy's getting a load of stick. I think it's quite cool.
I get his message, I get his point. I just think there's an awful lot of people now thinking, well, £10,000, you know, give that to a charity. Give it to an LGBTQ plus charity. Give it to a woman's charity. Give it to the migrant workers' charities that are, you know, trying to do good art in Qatar itself, rather than just shred it. So, but it's got us all talking about Joe Lycett.
Well, that's the thing. Is it actually talking about rights and Qatar, or are we talking about Joe Lycett? Because I have to say, I've never actually heard of his comedy until he popped up. Maybe it's because I'm a complete news geek, but until he popped up on a political show. And I was like, who is this comedian?
Yeah, I know.
And actually just pulls off these stunts, and we're all talking about him.
That's right.
I don't know if it's all more about him than really the morals of all of it. What do you think, Chris?
I think you're right. I mean, I hadn't heard of him until the last sort of few months, but he's a great publicist, self-publicist, and a branding artist. Now we know him more for some of his antics than his comedy.
Well, let's move on to a story from you, Chris, and another one that's caused huge division. Donald Trump is set to return to Twitter. Tell us about the story.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I think it's probably a better story for Elon Musk. I mean, he's had a bit of a hard time over the last couple of years. Spent his £44 billion to buy Twitter and sack a load of people, and under threat of it not working. And so he threatened to make Twitter more collegiate, more democratic. Had a vote in which 51.8% of people said, we want Trump to return. So there's 50 million people voted, and 51.8% of them said, we want it, which is not a ringing endorsement, but it's an endorsement nonetheless. But Trump, who was so prolific on Twitter when he was POTUS, president of the, he's been silent, because obviously he's got his own social media platform. Trump,
Truth.
Truth Social. So, it's a story. I don't know whether Donald Trump, anyone wants to follow Donald Trump if he's not the president. I think it was more the office that was important than Trump himself.
Except he mastered the art of Twitter, which at that time people didn't really do threads so much. It was all about trying to get your message into 150 characters, and he would do it all in caps, and he would just do these sound bites, and love or loathe his politics, the guy was a genius on Twitter. Yeah. And I suspect, yes, he hasn't tweeted yet, and he might not tweet for a while, because he obviously, as you say, he has Truth Social, which is trying to promote. He's not going to be able to resist.
But I think it's a danger on Twitter. The incitement to violence, which is why Twitter banned him when he said he lost the election or it was stolen, is very, very dangerous.
Well, that's debatable. I think that this is a conversation about free speech and who decides what free speech is. The people at Twitter, Elon Musk clearly decided, were making editorial decisions based around their own political viewpoints. Yeah. For example, the Taliban still had a Twitter account, whereas Trump didn't. So on what planet is that?
And we've broadcast his claims of electoral fraud on this channel, on every other news channel, in the newspapers. Those claims are repeated. I agree, they're dangerous and they're harmful to democracy, and he shouldn't be making those claims because they've been completely founded in absolutely no sentiment of truth. However, but
our broadcasting was ad hoc, as after the event, not pre-event. The challenge was that when he was doing it, it was people with the pickaxe and hammers going down Capitol Hill and storming the Capitol. I'm not a politician, obviously, but I can understand why Twitter were told, hold us back. You can't keep on sending people from the countryside of America down to Capitol Hill because it's dangerous.
They would argue that wasn't happening, but anyway, nevertheless, it's a huge talk.
No, it's difficult. It's
got us all talking about Twitter, hasn't it?
Exactly.
Should we talk about cancer now, Dawn? This is a story on the front of the Telegraph, a huge deal. The cancer toll is surging in the wake of the pandemic. Now, we know this, but actually it's very easy to become sort of oblivious, what's the word, numb to hearing this repeated, but it's a huge issue.
These are new statistics that have come out, which is why the story's moved on, and fair play to the Telegraph for splashing on this story. I think, and Chris and I were talking about this during the break, we both feel this story is incredibly important. There have been 900 more deaths, additional deaths, extra deaths than we expected this time of year since the beginning of September from cancer, and there were 230 extra additional deaths from cancer in 1 week. And this is because basically, I think we'll all admit now that the National Health Service became the National COVID Service.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think now it's coming home to roost how much damage it has done. Look, obviously, the whole COVID thing, it needed dealing with, but to shut down the service, and in some incidences, people are still struggling to get appointments if they're worried about cancer symptoms. To shut down the services now, it's basically condemning people to death.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out as well that there were experts like Dr. Carol Sikora,
absolutely,
who all along were saying this will be a problem, it's guaranteed to be a problem, you cannot shut down a point of service and not expect there to be a time bomb. He was absolutely vilified at the time. Has been proven to be completely correct.
He was, Martin, and sort of like in my own family, there has been sort of like 2 diagnoses of cancer very recently, and 3 people that I know have been diagnosed recently of cancer. And it's like suddenly there's this epidemic of diagnosis purely because these people weren't being seen for 2 years beforehand. And in at least one case, that has gone straight to a stage 4 diagnosis, which means it's please God, they've got plenty of time, but it's not, good news. So people are dying because of this. So this is something that the government now really needs to get hold of the NHS and sort out and tackle this problem. And there are 7.1 million people still on waiting lists for appointments.
Well, listen, we wish all of your family
Thank you.
Especially whoever's on that stage 4. That's an absolutely terrible situation, but we wish.
And it needn't have happened, Isabel. They're not alone either.
Awful. Time for one last story, Chris, because we do have to move on, but I want to talk about the climate deal that The Guardian's leading on this morning, talking about the world on the brink of catastrophe.
Yeah.
Give us some good news, Chris.
Yeah. Well,
See, Martin giggling.
look, I mean, this is a very difficult one for me because, so, what it says here is that the final negotiation after 40 hours staying behind is that poor countries are going to be given financial assistance called loss damage by rich governments. That's a positive story.
Arguably, some would agree, yeah.
Not for us.
Well, yeah, but the challenge I've got with this is that ever since I can remember, there's been year after year, decade after decade, you know, chicken licking, the sky's falling down. You know, polar ice caps are melting, ozones are spreading, and we're at the brink of disaster. And this is COP27, so there were 27 meetings to get things sorted.
They've all done well, haven't they, then?
Still haven't done it.
And, you know, on the flip side, we see this just stop oil and all their protests. And rightly or wrongly, what you can see is that these young people, some of them are young people, and some of them are more mature people, they really, really believe it.
Yeah, they do.
And they go out on a limb to do it. But then these guys, they fly to their places by planes, and you don't really believe they believe it. When I see the politicians have the urgency of just stop oil, then I know we are the creek without a paddle.
Listen,
We'll have to stop you there.
Sorry.
We've got one country. Chris, I can really say thank you very much.
End of the world for white.
It was nice there that we got to on that topic, but we'll come back to it if you forgive the analogy. Yes, we need to move on, but sorry guys, thank you.